लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु। स्वागतं शुभं त्वङ्कर् इकडे आगच्छामि। विनय स्वागतं शुभं। लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु। सर्वोपनिषदो गावः दुग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं ಗೀತಾಮೃತಂ ಮಹತ್. ಜಾಯ್ನ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರಾ?
ಆಚಾರ್ಯ ಜಾಯ್ನ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಮೆಸೇಜ್ ಎಲ್ಲ 2-3 ಸಲ ಕಳ್ಸಿದೀನಿ. ಸಣ್ಣಾಗಿ ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಮಾಡೋಣ ನಾವು. ಜಾಯ್ನ್ ಆದವರೆಲ್ಲ ಆಗ್ಲಿ.
ಸುರೇಶ್ ಇವನು ಯಾವಾಗ್ಲೂ ರೆಗ್ಯುಲರ್
ಇಲ್ಲ,
ಆಗಿ
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಮೆಸೇಜ್ ಕಳ್ಸಿದ್ದೆ. ರಾಜಶೇಖರ್ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಮೆಸೇಜ್ ಕಳ್ಸಿದ್ದೆ. ಹಬ್ಬದ ಮರುದಿವಸ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಬಿಸಿ ಇದ್ದಾರಂತ ಕಾಣ್ತದೆ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ.
ಆಯುಷ್ಮಾನ್ ಶುಭಮಸ್ತು. ಮಕ್ಕಳನ್ನು ಕರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಒಂದ್ ದಿವಸ ಬನ್ನಿ. ಅಷ್ಟು ಶುಭ. ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಒಂದ್ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಹೊತ್ತು ಮುಖ್ಯ ಸಂಘಟಕರೆಲ್ಲ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಹೀಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀರಾ? ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಆ ಜಾಗ ಸೌಂಡ್ನಾಗೆ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಮಾಡೋದು. Today we have very rare opportunity. Here there are more than I think 30 alumni of Veda Vijnana Gurukulam, and very much today it is today's alumni value added. Vinay Chandra is here, one who is well versed in modern and ancient Indian psychology, and I requested him to share his knowledge. So as long as many others also join, now let us start. So over to Vinay Chandra.
Namaste. It's a very pleasant opportunity to connect with you all and to spend some time with my seniors at Janseva. So it's a great opportunity, and as Ramchandra Bhattji was saying, upon his instructions, I would like to just share some of my experiences and insights into this field without taking much time, because I know that all of you are very keen to listen to Acharya ji. So I'll keep it very brief and short for that time being. I understand through these series of talks and interactions, you're exploring various facets of Bhagavad Gita, especially the psychological insights that are available in the Bhagavad Gita. And currently, you're looking into the 13th chapter, Kshetra Kshetrajna Yoga. So, without going into the chapter or the details of it, I would just like to share an insider's journey into this field for some time. After my studies in the Jan Seva, I came to Gurukulam after finishing my plus two in Bangalore. And while I was here, while I was going through the rigorous study of the Shastras, I also had an opportunity to do some of my courses, especially in the field of modern psychology, as a part of a course in education. And that's where I used to have some existential questions while reading some of these Western narratives or the modern narratives. Some of things, while it made sense, it also I had this feeling that I'm not able to connect to these ideas. There must be something else. So that basically led my quest into the field of psychology, and I started to explore the discipline of yoga primarily from the psychological perspective and what it has to offer to the discipline of psychology. And for last 8 to 10 years, I do travel abroad, spending 2 to 3 months in various universities and institutions in Europe mostly, where I work either with Indology departments or as a psychology departments, and where I had the opportunity to share some of these thoughts. So in this background, I thought I could share something as per Acharyaji's instructions. Especially if you look into the growth of modern psychology, somewhere it has about 200 years of journey to where it is currently. You could see some of the important trends and twists that it has taken during its journey. Though initially, when it started, the focus was on the inside, how to understand the mind. In fact, the word psychology, as you would be familiar, comes with these two terms, psyche and logos. Logos is the love for knowledge, and psyche is the mind, the inner stuff. So this is the knowledge about the inner stuff. That's how it started. But eventually, especially at the time when psychology developed as a discipline, the focus was on physics, objectification, the studying of the world in an objective manner. So, in this course, for some time, the focus of psychology changed from studying and trying to understand the mind stuff, rather than it became behaviorology. There were two major disciplines that shaped this approach. One is the Freudian approach, where it deals a little bit about the deeper psyche or the inner side, which in a way is shaped in the initial 3 to 4 years of one's life, and rest, the whole of one's life, is nothing but a prisoner of the past. I'm just trying to bring two important paradigms that have shaped the modern psychology, and how Indian approach differs, the Shastric approach differs significantly from this perspective. That's the only thing that I'd like to share this evening. The second approach was called as behaviorology, or it was started by behaviorists who started to study the behavior because they felt behavior is the only thing that can be objectively studied. You can't study the mind, you can't understand the thoughts. You can infer the thoughts based on one's behavior. So let me study the behavior. So this was another approach. So these were the two major streams of thought which dominated the field of psychology for quite some time. And as a result, the Western approach puts us into either of these paradigms. One, the Freudian paradigm, where what happens to you in the initial 4 to 5 years of your life, that's going to determine the entire trajectory of your life that follows. That means you're a prisoner of your past. What has happened to you? You're a victim always. So this victim mentality is somehow embedded in this approach of psychology. The other approach, that's the behaviorist approach. I'm just trying to give a very reductionist perspective of these approaches because of the time. This approach insists that the human behavior is predominantly shaped by the external circumstances. The environment determines how I'm going to react or respond to anything or everything that happens to me in the life. So, summary of this approach or this idea is that I am the victim of my circumstances. So, first approach makes me victim of my past. The second approach makes me the victim of my external circumstances. There is very little I can do from inside. The human will, the ability to liberate oneself from these circumstances is very limited in both the approaches. In fact, one of the propounders of this school, Watson, goes to the extent to say that give me a child, I can do anything of that child, whether you want me to make a thief or an engineer or a doctor or whatever, I can make by changing the external circumstances, which implies that there is no internal stuff. The human element is completely taken out of it. So in this approach, a human being is a mechanical reactionary box. In the first approach, the Freudian approach, the human being is nothing but a prisoner of its past experience. So either way, in both the approaches, the active human element, that is human will, is taken out. And these two schools dominated the psychology. Not just psychology, it actually influenced various domains of our lives. While I'm saying this, I'm not saying that these are completely bad or they have no practical applications. If you go to a supermarket, what works today is the Watson's behaviorist approach. You create an external environment where you're made to buy things irrespective of your will. So that's where there is complete application of the behaviorist school. Similarly, in some other conditions, the Freudian system, the understanding of what has happened to the individual at early stages of his life also has very practical applications. So both are valid. I'm not denying the validity of these two approaches. But the problem lies in the fact that limiting human capacities to these two approaches, making a human being prisoner of either your past or your circumstances, does not do justice to what a human being can actually accomplish in his life. So this element of freedom, this element of liberty, this element of bringing out the best of the human element is not so well developed, thought through in the Western or the dominant paradigm of psychology. No doubt there were approaches even in the West too. For example, there was one whole school that developed called as humanist psychology, which was led by people like, there are a few names, let me get them, but one whole branch was developed, but for some time, it did not get the required traction that was necessary to build it up further. So to a large part, the Western psychology was focusing on the limitations, and eventually, as a result, it was focusing on the illness of the individual. Rather than building and aiding the development of strengths, it was focusing on illnesses. So it was, in a way, it contributed, no doubt, to the understanding of the limitations of human personality, but it had very little tools and understanding to see what are the strengths, the resources a human being possesses, and how can one develop them further. So this element was completely missing. And that's where in last 2 decades, we see another branch of psychology coming to some extent to fill this gap, that is the positive psychology, where it says So far, psychology focused more on the negatives and the illnesses and the problems, but human being is much more than all these problems. Let us focus something on the positive side of the personality, and that's where positive psychology has come in. It's developing further, but even there, as I see, it lacks a proper theoretical base to go further, and also it lacks the elements and tools and proper time tested methodologies through which you can develop your positive aspects. And this is exactly the place where Indian thought, especially the insights from the yoga tradition, from the Bhagavad Gita, can augment, can come in and help this whole discipline of psychology to give both a very well laid out theoretical and philosophical basis for positive psychology, and also supply it with necessary tools which can be applied, can be tested, and can be used to bring out certain capabilities in the individuals. And that's the only reason why yoga spread like a wildfire over last 30-40 years all over the world. It's not because someone was intentionally trying to push it. People, when they started to benefit, when they started to see certain changes, not just at their physical level but at their psychological level. uh, I can easily share this with you that many of the students whom we meet abroad, they have no intentions to be yoga teachers, or they had no intentions to be in the field of yoga. They had some physical or psychological issue which could not be addressed through any of the means that they were familiar with. And while looking for alternatives, after having tested all the other easily available resources, then they landed up something on an experimental basis with yoga. And with their continued exposure and uh, experience with yoga, they started to feel certain things which they had not even thought about. So physically there was more strength, or um, there was some kind of uh, means to overcome restlessness. They could overcome stress. So many benefits, which both tangible and intangible, which they started to benefit, that made them explore it further and further. So, and then they slowly moved towards becoming yoga teacher, not to teach yoga, but just to deepen their own understanding in the field of yoga. And once they became teachers, like in some countries, it's unlike India. It's not just 1 month course or a 2 month course that you do. In many European countries that I am familiar with, it takes 4 years to be yoga teacher, and it involves a lot. I'm not speaking about America. I'm speaking largely about Europe, where it is a resource intensive effort. They'll have to spend dedicated their weekends. They'll have to go far where a teacher is there. They'll have to spend from their pockets, not just for the course but also for their accommodation, food, which, and the commitment is for over years. So despite this, they do this because they just want to deepen their own understanding, and not to teach, and definitely not to make a living out of it. That because in some countries it's still not possible to make a living, a luxurious living out of yoga, but because they have experienced something deeper. Once you taste nectar, there is no way you can go back. In fact, in one of these uh, good message cookies, no, I had got this beautiful message. It read something like this: once your soul is ready to never crawl. That's exactly what happens to people who are continuously engaged in the field of yoga, because they start to experience certain things, they just can't leave it. And with that, they become teachers. And once they become teachers, just out of the sheer push that they get from inside, because you have experienced something deeper, you can't just hold it on to it, hold that to yourself. You want to, you feel like sharing, you are compelled to share it, and then you start to teach. And this is how many people have ended up in yoga. So this is on one side. The reason why I mentioned it is for the simple reason that without any intentional push, it's not because we declared June 21st as International Yoga Day that people started to doing yoga. No, it is actually other way around. People all over the world have started or taken to yoga, and therefore it was easy to present it as a formal day to recognize the importance of yoga. Therefore, 21st June became International Yoga Day. That means without any such active efforts, just because people are experiencing it, this has spread like wildfire. And this is exactly where the or how the Indian thought can contribute in many domains, and especially in the field of psychology, both in the academic side, where it can bring in great insights into human personality, the understanding of human personality. There are many theories that we use. There are many explanations that we come across to understand the human mind, the behavior, and definitely that is one area. For example, we in the field of management and related areas, we use Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which tries to tell us as to how different needs have to be fulfilled for a human being to have his self fulfillment. But still, after a certain level, there is some gap that needs to be addressed, and the Indian thought can fill it up. In this way, there are many areas both on the academic side and as well as on the practical side where Indian thought, especially Yoga Sutra and the entire rich yoga tradition, has much to offer. In one of our universities where I teach in SRH Hochschule in Heidelberg in Germany, one of my colleagues who heads the department there, Bettina, she always makes this statement. She says that in the industrial revolution, we see various important stages that has taken place. Industry 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. So now somewhere with regard to industrial revolution, we are at the 4.0, right? But when it comes to understanding of the human mind or human being, it has not gone beyond 2.0 because there is no new thought that has come in. And that's where the modern Western psychology has hit a roadblock. And what can actually give the required impetus and the push is the Eastern thought largely, and there too, Indian thought specifically from these sources. Having said this, let me just summarize with the other side. The entire Yoga Sutra text that is there, it has about 196 short statements called sutras. Okay. And in this entire text, there are only very few sutras which refer to asanas or pranayama. So yoga no doubt involves asana and pranayama, but it is not to be limited by it. Then what does it contain? In various chapters, especially in the first chapter, in the second chapter, in the third chapter, fourth predominantly is little philosophical in nature, but the first three is intensely practical, and there too the first two is fully practical, and all that we deal with in these two chapters is nothing but the mind. In fact, the very second sutra, the very second statement, it goes in the way that yoga chitta vritti nirodha. That means yoga is nothing but cessation or stoppage of the movements or modifications of the mind. If this is the statement, if this is what is desired, this is what to be achieved, then the entire text has to deal with what are the modifications, how do you stop them, and what is the mind. So this exactly is the text, and therefore Yoga Sutra text is nothing but practical psychology. It not only tells you how to understand the mind, but also equips you with proper philosophical basis and also tools. It's just like gifting you a beautiful toolbox which is completely end user customizable. There is no standard formats. What works for one need not work for the other. Understanding this individual difference, you are being given a fully customizable toolbox which you can identify what tool works best for you and accordingly modify it and then start using it and then build upon your own strengths. So therefore yoga in that sense is nothing but purely practical psychology, and all the other related texts, whether it is Bhagavad Gita, whether it is other texts of Vedanta, will offer us great insights to augment the ideas that are present in the Yoga Sutra text. So, I just thought I'll put these things in a very brief manner and present these ideas. If there are any questions or something that you want to share or ask, we can discuss for a few minutes, and then Acharya ji will take over from this point onwards.
Excellent. I mean, Vinay, really, we are happy to hear your vast knowledge on psychology, and some of the things which you put in front of us is really impressive. Yeah, somewhere some couple of things are there where I may required or to debate with you, or probably I have to know more from you. But overall things, if whatever in perspective, whatever today's context of psychological thinking and yoga sutra, you told very good. I mean, I'm really happy for it. One small query is, you said your past is your victim of your psychological present, correct? So when a person, you can correct me if whatever you said, if I quote wrong. What I was trying to tell you is, when a human being, after he borns, right, there is a various stages where he grows, from the childhood to teenage, to then to next into marriage things, and there are various stages, right? What I feel like, every stage when he grows, the psychological thinking, or the his approach towards the surroundings or external things will also differ based on the his growth, right? So I just thought of, what is your opinion on that? Because when we talk about past is your victim of your past, but past never come in front of uh, current situation when we are growing in a different circumstances, in different things, right? So just thought of asking you this.
Sure. There's also another question or a hand raised by Indira ji. So maybe should we take it up and then
Yes,
come back?
yes, 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 yes. Indira ji, you have any questions? Your hand is raised. I just thought of. No issues. So Vinay, you can continue.
No. Okay. I mean, if I understand your question right, there are two components there. One is the past determining the present aspect in one's growth trajectory. This is valid in the sense that some of our deep fears, deep desires have been shaped at a very young age, which we don't even know. Even Yoga Sutra, in the very beginning of the second chapter, it identifies the presence of what it calls as patterns. That's a beautiful word that it uses for klesha. Various patterns that are present at four different modes: Prasupta, Tanu, Vichhinna, and Udara. Prasupta is dormant, Vichhinna is interrupted, Tanu is either flattened or attenuated, and Udara is a fully blown up stage. So what is active currently is Udara, which we easily recognize. I'm angry, I'm shouting, I'm doing this. So that is the Udara stage. But there is also, while I'm experiencing something, what I had experienced few minutes back, I have just put it for the time being in the not in the driver's seat, but in the back seat. That is Vichinna or interrupted. But there are some things which are lying beneath the floor itself, dormant, which I'm not even aware, but can surface with all vengeance at some point of time. That is Prasupta. So in these four levels, even Yoga Sutra acknowledges the presence of our deep desires, attractions, fears, which are largely modern shaped by what happens to us in first few years of our life. Whereas some of modern approaches, especially the Freudian school, it limits the human personality. According to this approach, you just cannot escape this snare. You are eternally caught. All that you can do is to somehow manage and minimalize the damage, nothing more. And therefore, Freudian system sees human being in an eternal conflict with all the things around. So harmony is an unnatural thing according to this approach of, like, we are not familiar with what the implications are, but that's how we actually, these are the what the paradigms in which we are made to live and understand. According to this approach, human being has to be essentially in conflict with everything around. If there is harmony, then that is not a natural state. And therefore, that's why they say, when some people take up to the life of sannyasa, or they say they have given up desires, that seems to be so artificial for them in this approach. But whereas in our thought, while the past has a very strong potential to determine our future, yet we have the capacity to grow and outgrow, where that's where human element comes into picture. No doubt I have gone through these experiences, but I'm not limited by them. There is a very profound philosophical basis when we do the Neti approach in Vedanta. I am not this, I am not this. I'm just giving a, I'm just running through this Indic approach part that actually allows us to appreciate this fact that I am not my thought, I am not my fears, I'm not all these coverings that are there. I'm much larger than all these things. No doubt it takes a while to experientially get there, but at least to begin with, there is a theory which helps us to move beyond my coverings which have come through my past. And not just there is a theory, but there are practical sadhana methodology that has been given. I think that's the most beautiful part. Like, let me, I always like this example. When we do an asana, okay, the way asana works is something magical in nature. Asana gives us physical strength. It also gives us flexibility. All that is fine, but it does something more, much more deeper than we even realize. When I get into a difficult position, then my body initially does not take the situation happily, right? When body is familiar with a program, body comfortable, smile, body uncomfortable, frown. This is a binary program which we come with. But when I start working with an asana, when I'm doing a forward bending or a backward bending, day by day, I'm pushing my limits further and further. Body is not comfortable. And over and above, the teacher who is teaching, knowingly or unknowingly, also says, please wear a beautiful smile. Body does not understand this initially. It feels that I'm not comfortable, how can I smile? But insisting upon it consistently, then body starts, body uncomfortable yet smile. Okay, body uncomfortable, smile. This could be artificial initially, this could be out of force, this could be by effort, but over a period of time, what it happens is, body uncomfortable yet I can smile. A new program has been put into place, and eventually what also happens is body comfortable, uncomfortable does not matter, smiles. You're actually moving into a new paradigm. So you're growing and outgrowing certain limiting paradigms and programs, which according to some schools is your final thing. But here there is a theory as well as methodology through which you can outgrow and overcome these limitations.
So you mean Yoga Sutra is definitely contribute to all these activities which happens knowingly or unknowingly or artificially or whatever when we come. So Yoga Sutra is definitely contributing, right?
Very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you. Good. I mean, very nice to hear you talking, and we love to have more such sessions. Thank you so much. We have other friends of us,
Yeah.
Smithal, Mr. Rajendra Pasar, Shivram.
Yeah. Just want to thank you. I joined little late, so missed initial part of it, but I'm sure will since the session is getting recorded, I'll be able to get. Being in the leadership area, So I was able to relate to Sigmund Freud from the framework that you spoke about, you know, and I feel such sessions would definitely be helpful. Um Thanks a ton. First and foremost is heartfelt thanks to you. Amazing session, and please, I look forward for many such sessions. Please do take sessions, and especially Ashtanga yoga that you spoke about, and very nicely you spoke what is getting covered in chapter wise. Would love to hear from you if there could be some sessions around that of the sutras. 400. I forget the number that you
About
shared.
about 200, 196 sutras.
196 sutras. If you could help, actually, maybe at a helicopterian view, and then maybe we can get down. But would definitely love to be part of this session, and also like to take this opportunity and thank the Sutradhar, without whom this would not have been possible. So thanks a ton for the organizer.
No,
Thanks to
we are proud of Vinay. He is one of our alumni. So we are, I mean, we definitely, his contribution is required for our Suvarna Mahotsava, Vinay.
absolutely. Thanks a ton.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
Thank you.
Anybody else we can? Thank you, sir. Thank
Maybe
you so
then
much.
I'll hand it over to Acharya ji.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Acharya. Namaste. Thank you.
Namaste. Thank you so much.
शुभमस्तु नित्यं समस्तः सुखिनो भवन्तु। Today we can take up on that day we were just discussing about Vivikta Desha Sevitvam. With a special reference to the 13th chapter. Krishna has given a special insight about knowledge, cognitive clarity. Just now, I think you discussed about psychology, ancient and modern, how to understand our alumni of both Janaseva and Veda Vijnana Gurukulam, Vinay Chandra. He has nurtured that thought process. His PhD area also, it is very much connected to this. So his understanding of great Aurobindo's human psychology, it is very insightful. When we think about human psychology as such, both ancient and Western thinking gets blended. That is what we have to think on that line. Now you can just share some of thoughts also, so that we can have free interaction now. Smithal, yes, please. You can ask some questions so that we can take up.
Yeah, Guruji. Namaste, Guruji.
Namaste. Shubham.
Shubham. Guruji, one question. In fact, I had asked this last
Vinay.
time also.
Oh, last time.
Last time.
Yes.
Last
I
time.
remember.
Yeah, Guruji. Aspects of or the ways or insights of understanding self, and one area that I am struggling with is how to control anger. And anger, especially anger, is sometimes it is external driven. It is on people, on the circumstances, but more complex is where you are angry on self. My anger or frustration is on self and not on it is not on others. So that area help, Gurveer.
Um, Here we must go to its root level. Root level in the sense why and how.
Yeah.
Why and how. Why I am vulnerable to sudden outburst of anger. It is very dangerous. It comes due to external pressures and many such problems pertaining to human relationship, sometime due to discontent, dissatisfaction, so that the root to be examined. Then we can attend it. Why I am so angry? Where I become angry? What causes outburst of my anger? Such things we have to go for analyzing. This is called analysis. Anger analysis, you can call it. Anger analysis. This anger has its own root at greed level. There we must have some control. More and more you plan for very high, which is beyond your reach, that will not be materialized. When it is not materialized, you develop some sort of discontent about your own capacities and your own success rate. That is why we have to be very careful there. That is why Krishna says all these qualities. First is self-ego to be controlled. That is amanitva. And we must go for genuine reasons, not something prejudiced or preconditioned. Objective, be objective. This is this. 2 plus 2, 4. Not even 3, not even 5. That type of objective analysis must be there. Why I am getting anger and what causes it? That is how we have to go. And as I know you, you are very much highly ideal you were in your teenage and your student life. And through your further life journey, also you were so much principled. That is the contrast between Vaibhav Shah and Smritar Shah. Vaibhav Shah is very, very practical man, so that he analyzes any problem there and then very objective. And your mind is very much ideal. Your mind is very emotional. And you never become ready for compromises. ये कुछ संधान करना, ये भी सच है, वो भी सच है, ये नहीं तुमको पसंद नहीं है, यही सच है, ये भी सच है, वो भी सच है, नहीं है, वैभव को क्या होता है, ये काम करना है, लिपटना है, I must get this done, so that he will be very clever and very much situation friendly. Am I correct?
Yeah, Guruji.
Your
Yeah.
mind, I think, never makes such compromises. That is why you, I think, encountered many problems in your life. But you have very good, kind-hearted, cooperative life partner in your wife. I think she is there to share. And mother is also there to take that. Whatever problem comes, tension comes, she was, I think, there to help you. And you were with her. And she was there to support. So, I am not going to make it personalized. Many of our old students have this type of problems. That is why self-analysis, okay. But you just adopt some sort of japa mantra every day, early in the morning, whatever deity you like, that you practice. For example, just now, for 4 or 5 days, I was in Belgaum. There, this is Alaukika Jhana Mandira. Great Babaji, Shivanandji, he belongs to the lineage of that Paramahamsa Yogananda, Yogi's biography of yoga. And even in this age, now I am completing my 72nd years of my journey. I got some new ideas just to go in. There, staying in that cave type construction in that mandir. I sat hours together. I went inside. What is that merit and demerit, plus and minus? Now, because next month it is my, I am stepping into 73rd year of my life passage. So, in this context, we must adopt some yogic way of life, particularly mode of meditation. There you can choose your own deity, but that is to be seriously taken, and we must channelize our mental energy. That will make you mentally strong. Once you strengthen your inner potentiality, mental capacity, easily you can have control over your emotions. Control over your emotions in the sense, control over your anger first. For some people, it is lust. But you are all good householders, so that kamat krodho bhijayate, krodhat bhavati sammoha. These are the steps. But you have no such any suppressed lust. You already enjoyed that life, ups and downs. Now this anger is only, it is your anger is positively charged anger. It is only due to success rate, due to some sort of inferiority problem. I am not so well, I am not so good, I am not so competent. This type of feelings, if it is haunting, give it up. You are very competent, your success rate also good, and you have many good qualities. Those good qualities you go on contemplating and contemplating. मुझ में ये सब है, ये सब नहीं, ये चिंतन मत करो, ये सब है, भगवान ने दिया है मुझे, इसके सहारे मैं आगे बढ़ूंगा. दिस टाइप ऑफ power of positive things you can instill in your personality. That will help you. So that this list of 21 qualities in 13th chapter, you can go to that chapter. Amanitvamadambhitvam kshantirarjavam acharyopasanam. That is good. Now you are in the company of good people. You freely exchange. That itself is very good for your control of anger. When you share with person like me and many like-minded people, that will help you to control your own feelings. That is one thing. So that list of good qualities. In one place, Shri Krishna has given that whole list, which will help you to enhance your emotional capacity, purification of your emotions. Acharya Upasanam, that means proximity. अच्छे लोगों के साथ रहना, अच्छे लोगों के साथ संवाद करना, उनके साथ वाद विवाद करना अच्छा है. मौनम, silence, that is what you can practice early in the morning. I don't know what is your mode of working, whether you have to work for late night, I don't know. If that is there, problem will be there. At least before the sunrise, you get up and go for some sort of meditation. That Atma Vinigraha. Atma Vinigraha means control over your emotions. And Anahankara, that you have, lack without ego problem. You have no that problem. That is what I know. Some students have that problem. Ego. Though they have good samskaras, very good backing, good way of life, good aptitudes and interests, but only this ego problem comes inside. Then they create many problems. And problem after problem chased by another problem, chasing another problem. This is very endless. That is why Krishna warns, you have all this. Kamat krodha, krodhat samoha, smriti vibhrama, buddhinasha. All these words he used. For that root is lust, greed. Any of you have this problem, certainly even people like me who are here in this Gurukula, nobody is free from all this. We also have many weak points. Nobody is free. Under the sun, nobody can say that I am free from negativity, free from emotional problem. No. But every day we must go for manasika snana, purification. For that only japa and dhyana, two are very, very important. That too in this very solitary place. Main problem is many of you always in the crowds. Even inside your house also you never go for solitary sadhana, ekanta sadhana. Many of my friends, they have that type of meditation hall in their house inbuilt. On the top of their house, they have built a small pyramid. Yesterday I was in Dharwad. There they have built their own house as a good, beautiful temple. Divine abode. It was like this. Yesterday I was in one of our sister of my Gurukula student. She got that type of idea, and her husband also very much accommodative, very pious couple. I told them, you have all this. So that they used all modern technique, very highly rich, funded couple they are. But they have that aesthetic sense, Saundarya Prajna, and divine awareness. That is why they have built that type of. So in your own house, you can have that type of solitary place where you can be in ekanta. That type of thing I earnestly recommend for you all. Always in the crowds, very dangerous. When we are always in a crowd, we talk too much. We talk too much. Talking too much itself is dangerous. We must have mita, hita, ruta. Mita means limited. Hita means very healthy. Satyam bruyat, priyam bruyat, na bruyat, satyam apriyam, priyanchana, anratam bruyat, esha dharma sanatana. How to talk? Mahabharata says. Talking must be very smooth. No sharp words, no rough words. That is Smita. I know how much you have that. You inherited that culture. Smooth talking, smooth approach, friendly approach. Many of you have like this. That you can strengthen, but only with special reference to today's talk. Again, repeatedly, I emphasize that you must go for ekanta sadhana at least 1 hour in your house, half an hour, that too early in the morning. It will take care of all such mental problems.
Sure, Guruji.
Hmm.
Thank you.
That is how all these list of 2021 qualities from this 13th chapter, you can have wonderful guidance, and English translation also available. Translation is by Somanathananji, Adityavananji of Ramakrishna Mission, Mysore, and Kannada available. English also there. Many great Swamijis from Ramakrishna Mission, they have made it very simple translation that you study, and you just this book is there, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, very simple. It is published by this one, Gita Press Gorakhpur in Kannada. So here you can go to 13th chapter. There in 13th chapter, this particular area is this one is shloka number 7, I think. Yes. Yes, amanitvam adambhitvam. From 7th shloka, 8th shloka, 9th shloka, 10th and 11th, 12th, 10th shloka, up to 10th. एतत् ज्ञानं 12th श्लोक अध्यात्मज्ञान नित्यत्वं तत्त्वज्ञानार्थदर्शनम् एतत् ज्ञानं. Please, if you have underlined jnanam, make it round. So let us meet on the next Sunday. Proceed further. Let us conclude. Do you have anything to share?
Nothing, Acharya. I think we have summed up very well. Thank you so much.
ॐ यत्र योगेश्वरः कृष्णः यत्र पार्थो धनुर्धरः तत्र श्रीः विजयो भूतिः ध्रुवा नीतिः मतिर्मम. ॐ तत्सत्.
Priyam Acharya. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anand.
Thank you so much. Thanks for
Thank you.
joining.